I've been thinking a lot about our first principle, that we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And of all the principles, it is one that I struggle with most often. I do hold it dear. It's one of the essential principles for me, but I really do have trouble with its implications. I want to respect other people and their inherent worth and dignity and their right to their own opinions. But when I hear that face masks are dangerous and infringe on freedom, I just want to call people idiots. And I'm a minister. And in seminary, one of the books we had to read was called Never Call Them Jerks. It's a struggle. How do we live together when we don't live in the same reality? If we can't agree on facts like face masks reduce the risk of virus transmission, then what is our common ground? And yet I also find myself needing to accept that as Unitarian Universalists, we are asked to find that way to respect people's inherent worth and dignity, even when they're factually wrong. We're grounded in relationships and interdependence, which means we need to find a way. Part of our religious tradition is to find ways to cross divides, throw lifelines, build bridges. And it really isn't easy. And I know many of you are challenged by coworkers and family who hold opinions and attitudes that are actually hurtful and harmful to others. An anarchist nephew, a Trump supporting cousin, an evangelical aunt who swears you're going to hell. How do we find a way to be in a relationship with people with opposing views? And how do we get beyond thinking at times they are dangerous idiots? And as it has been said by others, no one has ever changed someone's mind by yelling at them. We have to take the time to nurture and build those connections, to listen. And I want to say there is an exception to this. If you are the person, if it is your identity under attack by another standpoint, if you are experiencing slurs about your race, your gender, your sexuality, you do whatever it is you need to do to first and always affirm your own inherent worth and dignity. You can yell, you can walk away, you do whatever you need for yourself. You don't have to be in a relationship with someone who is harming you. And the work I'm really talking about today is for allies. Those of us who are not under direct attack have an opportunity to seek to live that principle of honoring everyone's inherent worth and dignity. To be allies and respectful of difference, however unpalatable that may be. Is trying to argue facts, that face masks really do reduce virus transmission, won't work. Telling someone they're wrong doesn't work. Instead, try and be curious. Be curious about that other person as a person, as a human being. Ask questions and listen. There's always a reason why someone needs to blame another group of people or protest the truth. And it's usually trauma or pain or fear. It's a defensive mechanism. It's an acting out. And this doesn't make harmful attitudes in any way acceptable, but it does make them understandable. People get louder the less they feel heard. And condemning them without listening only makes it worse. And again, I know it's hard. I don't want to respect people who do harm. And I certainly don't respect these views. But I can try to find a way to acknowledge their humanity. Principles matter most when we are faced with those who would negate them. If I hate back, then I'm losing myself, my identity. The fact that somebody else wants to treat other people as less than doesn't mean I get to do the same to them. A young man has a racist white grandfather. The grandfather has a swastika tattoo and he is outspokenly nasty about pretty much everyone. His daughter marries a black man and he disowns her, but he likes his biracial grandson because he looks white. Now the grandfather becomes ill, he's dying, and the grandson decides to build a relationship with him for the very pragmatic reason of getting into the will. The grandson's experienced his grandfather's racism firsthand. He's seen the harm it's done to his father, but he knows the money would help his family. And so the grandson begins to visit his grandfather a couple of times a week. And he starts by asking his grandfather about his life, getting to just know him. And over time, he comes to see his grandfather not only as that racist, but also as a deeply hurt and traumatized person who has had a very rough life. When we know one another's stories, the personal stories that are only revealed as relationships are nurtured, it's so much harder to hate. Now, this story isn't about the transformation of the grandfather, some deathbed change to being a loving God. You can't stop someone else from hating. You can only stop yourself. And the grandson, after spending his life hating his grandfather, stops. He doesn't suddenly love his grandfather after years of damage, but he does understand why he was that way. And he feels compassion for that lonely and hurting, dying old man. His initial selfishness, hid in the will, has expanded into connection and compassion. And it's this heart shift that opens up space to build bridges across divides. It's being able to see people for all they are, monstrous, cruel, traumatized, and hurt. And it's being able to hold those difficult contradictions with compassion. That's what creates connection and healing. And I firmly believe this is the work of Unitarian Universalists, to shift our hearts to hold all humans, the good and the terrible, to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people, no exceptions. I know that what I'm saying feels sort of almost too easy, too simplistic, and unfair. Treat others with respect, be curious and build compassion, build connections, and be compassionate. And I know the truth that the outcome of being like this is not going to be sharing tea and cookies and world peace. Respect won't stop the rise of fascism. And there are many problems that can only be addressed by organized coalitions, by governments. There's cultural, legislative, and economic change needed. Political power needs to remain accessible, not concentrated in the hands of the few. And those with power need to be held accountable always, people. But respect, curiosity, and compassion, they allow me to live with myself, to stay true to the principles that I've built my life upon. And it's not that I don't feel hate. I have felt my fair share of hate and anger towards those people whose actions are doing active harm to people and the planet. But I also know, the better side of me knows, that turning other people into the enemy, into figures of evil, doesn't help or heal. It only perpetuates the problem. And so I try to acknowledge my hate and anger and frustration, to live with it, and try not to stay there, and try not to act out of that hate and anger, or out of the fear and the pain. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I act out badly. Sometimes even good people do harm. This teacher, Tara Brock, speaks honestly about her mother, who was a loving mother in a middle-class family, raising 4 children. And she was also a practicing alcoholic for many years, struggling with depression and other issues. So much so that her younger children now show some signs and symptoms of fetal alcohol syndrome. Now, Tara's mother had the strength to turn around in high school. When Tara was in high school, she joined Alcoholics Anonymous and dedicated herself to sobriety after that. But for many years, her relationship with her children, while loving, was also strained because of her guilt and shame around the damage her actions has caused. And finally, over much time with therapy, she came to terms with her choices and found compassion for herself, eventually being able to forgive herself and find some inner peace. And Tara notes that in her mother's final years, when she had forgiven herself, she really became a truly caring and generous person. She was able, with that compassion she had found for her own self, she was able to awaken that compassion and offer it out into the world. We all have darkness and struggle inside us. We can all be cruel and selfish at times. And we make choices from fear and panic. We do harm to ourselves, we do harm to others. Respect, curiosity, and compassion are meant for ourselves as well. Respect for our own inherent worth and dignity, no matter what the darkness inside may tell us. We offer ourselves curiosity, and we sit with our stormy feelings and our difficult wants and find out what it is we truly need. And we offer ourselves the gift of compassion. We all deserve tenderness. And when we can ground ourselves in loving compassion, that gives us the strength to live by our principles, principles that matter more now than ever. When people all over the world continue to try and dehumanize a group and identity, we can show that up for the lie that it is. We ourselves have to resist dehumanizing others and continue to show respect, even when we refute attitudes. We're all human, darkness and light struggling together. And to change this world, the world we're in now, begins with changing ourselves. When a pebble is tossed into a pond, the ripples flow out in widening circles until it reaches the shore. But the ripples always begin with the smallest circle first, with ourselves and with those we're in relationship with. And so when we can manage and find that respect and offer deep listening across difference, people feel heard, relationships are built, and hearts are shifted. After all, if we know we can change and grow as we have over the years, so can anyone. Lewis is a white man living in Mississippi. He grew up loving the Confederate flag, and he flew it proudly. And one day, several years ago, a high school friend, a Black woman, Genesis, invited him over to talk about it because they'd ended up in a dispute. They'd unfriended each other on social media, but this Black woman had the strength and courage to reach out. And Lewis says, Genesis challenged me. She asked me questions, and I started looking at it from others' points of view, and my heart opened up. And Lewis took his Confederate flag down. It should change because it hurts my neighbors. I'm not going to lose my heritage. My heart opened up. People can change. When we're willing to listen to one another and face those hard truths together, while respecting difference, when reaching each other emotionally, hearts shift. And so may we be part of bridge building. May we have curiosity and compassion for ourselves and others. May we strive to treat each person with inherent worth and dignity. Let us help heal the world. So say we all.